And here we go, I think. There we go. All right. Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Eric Smith, and we're going to jump right into another episode of My Favorite Horror with occasional YouTuber, a podcaster, and the author of such things as Vicky Beautiful, Killer Chronicles, A Fresh Start, and The Hag Witch of Trip Creek. It is Somer Canon. Hello, Somer.
Hi there. Thank you for having me back.
Thank you for coming back. I figured we could promote some of your stuff there. I just got this one recently. Of course, have an old copy of Vicky Beautiful, a wonderful little horrifying book.
I think of all my stories that people reach out to me to basically yell at me about, Vicky Beautiful is the one that upsets people the most.
I loved it, and it's been a little while since I've read it, but just to me, just the straightforward description of what's going on when we get to a certain point, like it didn't feel like you were trying to be over the top or anything, or like purposefully make it horrifying. And that's what made it horrifying. This is what's happening. These are the very simple things that are going on. And that was, to me, that was just chilling. Now, we set this up pretty quickly, this little interview, and I forgot that I'm angry with you. And I'm angry with Matt as well. But you were bad-mouthing Darkman. And then I found out that you're not a big fan of the novel Frankenstein.
Yeah, that's right.
And I made it a point to wear my shirt with my Frankenstein quote on it. I love my Frankenstein quote. Well, we'll start with Darkman. So I don't recall what you said on the podcast. I assume you'd seen it before watching it for the podcast.
I watched it once, not long after it first came out, like when it was first on HBO or something. I hadn't seen it in the theaters. I saw it when it came out on cable. And I remember watching it and being like, okay. And then, I took a more deep dive look at it for the podcast, obviously. And it's not that I didn't like it. It was just, I don't think it was meant to be that funny. That's the problem.
See, and I think it was meant to be that funny.
Not that funny. See, Sam Raimi's always going to Sam Raimi. There's always going to be something funny in it, always. But I was laughing in parts that I think he was wanting me to feel something. And they were so over the top about it where I was laughing because it was like, don't try to force emotions on me.
You didn't love Liam Neeson and Frances McDormand together?
I thought that was a weird ass combination. Like, this was before this was one of those things where it's hindsight. I cannot remember how I felt about that when it first came out because they weren't Liam Neeson and Frances McDormand back then. But right. Watching it now and knowing their biographies and stuff, knowing what they put out, it was just like, oh, this is weird. This is a weird combination.
Well, now, if I'm not mistaken, and it's been a long time since I think I heard this, but I believe at one point, Sam Raimi, the Coen brothers, Frances McDormand, Holly Hunter, and maybe some others, all lived together.
Oh, really?
So I was not surprised that Frances McDormand was in a Sam Raimi movie. And I could have that wrong.
Well, both the Coen brothers, the Darkman had several rewrites. That script was worked and reworked so many times. It's a wonder why it made even a cohesive movie at all, because it was rewritten so much. But the Coen brothers took a shot at it. They had their fingers in that.
I wish I used to have the novelization, and I wish I still had it and could reread it, because I've read a lot of novelizations, and a lot of times you're getting basically an early draft of the movie
Mm-hmm.
when you read the novelization. It'd be interesting to go back and read that and see if it follows that, if it has more than the movie, or is quite a bit different than the movie. Now I know in that I didn't get to finish listening to that episode of the podcast. Oh, and first of all, I saw Dark Man in the theater, and I love it. um, but you guys talked about Bram Stoker's Dracula a little bit in that episode.
Mm-hmm.
And what was your opinion of that?
My opinion is that I love that movie, but again, I don't think I was supposed to be laughing through most of it. I get into fights about this movie a lot because my main argument is the movie is worthless except for its comedic value. Because
Okay.
I love Francis Ford Coppola. I love that he makes sure to always put the author of the book from which the movie is based on in the title of the movie. I think that's great. I wish everybody did that. You know, they make movies out of books and they don't even put in the fucking credits in the beginning based on the works of. They don't even
Right.
mention the author. And Francis Ford Coppola has always been all about giving the author credit. It's just, you know, he can be a little over the top. He has his own style that when it works, it works. Like it works. And when it doesn't, it's funny because it's so, what are you going for here? And I think with Bram Stoker's Dracula, there were a lot of really good ideas. There's a lot of stylistic choices that I really appreciate. But as a whole, all of the actors are high. There's no way this is the product that they would normally want to put out. A huge fan of Keanu Reeves, and I know Keanu has his moments. You know, there are a lot of detractors for Keanu. I'm not one of them. I tend to really like his stuff. I love Winona Ryder. I actually think she's a huge talent, and they both suck in this movie. Like suck. Anthony Hopkins. I don't know what he's doing. Again, huge talent, knows what he's doing. I think he's high. I would. What is he doing with some of those line deliveries? And it's just like I have thoughts about um Gary Oldman. I think Gary Oldman's great. I just think he's an actor who tends to suck all the air out of the room because he does it so big. He's one of those guys that can play a small part and have it be the most memorable part in the whole movie because he made it so weird and so over the top. Making him the lead was, I don't know if it was a mistake because it is memorable the way he acted it, but it made it so easy to parody. It made it so easy to make fun of.
I've only seen it once, and I did not like it at all. And part of my problem was the fact that it was titled Bram Stoker's Dracula, because I came out of it saying that was not Bram Stoker's Dracula.
I actually think it's a lot more faithful to the book than some other movie adaptations have been. And it's an IP that has been done and redone, especially in movies. And it has been watered down because of the sexual undertones with it, to the point where maybe you don't realize some of the story because you're so used to seeing Bela Lugosi or seeing oh my God, Christopher Lee play the part. You're so used to seeing these really over the top things go on. And I mean, again, the Francis Ford Coppola version is over the top, but there was respect for the book there, I thought, even while going completely banana pants with the actors. Like, I don't know what they were handing out for lunches there, but it wasn't sandwiches.
All right, well, twice in my life I've been compared to Gary Oldman. I don't know why. When I was in the Air Force and had a buzz cut, someone said I looked like Sid from Sid and Nancy. And then after I got out of the Air Force and let my hair grow really long, someone said I look like Dracula from Bram Stoker's Dracula. I don't see it, but I'll take it. I love Gary Oldman. He gives one of my favorite performances in Leon the Professional. Talk about over the top.
Yes.
But
Yes.
amazing.
But see, he's good in those little parts because he takes all the air out of the room. It's all attention is on him, and he's good at that. And I just think it's because you know what, he's really good in Sid and Nancy. That's a good movie. But I think I don't know. It was a weird choice making him the lead. He had the right look for certain, but I just it was too easy to make fun of him.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I see that, and I see Mr. Burns in the Treehouse of Horror where they do Dracula, and Mr. Burns has the big giant buns and is doing the Dracula thing. All right. I guess maybe I'm not quite as angry with you now. Well, no, we didn't finish talking about my complaints. What's wrong with Frankenstein? I mean,
So
you talked about this on the podcast, but
it's a 3-hour long episode. We really
yes.
got into it, so it's understandable if you couldn't make it through it. So this is a book that I've read several times. One of them was against my will and for school. The other 3 or 4 times, well, I did it of my own volition because I am somewhere beneath this facade a huge masochist. So my problem with the book and with a lot of the movies is I read a really, really great biography on Mary Shelley, and it talked a lot about those early years of her life, those early years of her adulthood, those early years of her creativity. And I think if she'd paid the same amount of love to her own works as she did to Percy Shelley's, she would have seen, I think, what I see, and that the most interesting character in that book is not Victor Frankenstein, it's the monster.
Well, of course it's the monster.
And yet we're constantly having to deal with this selfish, self-centered man who makes everything about his feelings, who is cowardly. And you know that he did the monster wrong, and you're given a glimpse into the monster's thoughts and his experiences, but ultimately the book is about this highly unlikable character. Now, that's a big overview. I've tried again many times to read this book, and every time it loses me at one part. And that's when, we're lots of pages into the book by this point. We have to hear about his ambition, his inflated sense of ego, his inflated sense of self, all this studying and looking down on people that he's done, and he does it. He succeeds at what he set out to do. He has reanimated a corpse. The corpse moves. What does he do? He runs away, locks himself in his bedroom, and goes to sleep. I got a big problem with this. I kind of can't help that the story completely flings me out of it by that point. It's like, I'm no longer in this. This is not good. And the good thing about this story is that it has received so much attention through the stage and through screen, and that the most interesting parts of Frankenstein that we draw on now, when we think of it, is the experiments, the gadgetry that goes into reanimating a corpse. And that's all from the more visual aspects of it. They've been making this story into a stage production pretty much since it was first published. And they've been tinkering with the story and tinkering with the visuals of it until they finally came to, it's fascinating actually seeing it happen, because you don't see it happen in the book. You're just kind of hinted at. I studied and I'm super smart, and I did it, the fingers moved.
That's anytime I see any version of it that has the laboratory and all of the equipment and the open ceiling and everything, and I'm like, in the book, he's just like, yeah, I've got some chemicals and a little electricity, and he's alive now.
Yeah.
But now, Frankenstein, it is my favorite of the classic horror novels. I absolutely love it, and I'm not ashamed to say it makes me cry every time I read it. When the monster befriends the blind man, and the blind man's family comes home and freaks out and chases him off, I get
Yep.
all choked up because I identify with the monster. Love the monster. As I said, have my quote right here on my shirt. Um, yeah, I adore that book. I have a couple copies. I actually want to get like a bunch of different copies with just really cool covers. Since it is my favorite, and I wish I had them close at hand.
This is the Scholastic version.
All right, I have a hardback one that came out between 5 and 10 years ago, maybe. That's got sort of, it's a very green cover, but this, I think it was a British publisher, did these sort of hipster covers for classics. And and the only place I'd ever seen them was Half Price Books, and I got the Frankenstein cover, and it's basically he's the Fonz. It's the monster is on a motorcycle with a leather jacket, and it looks like a 60s kind of thing, which is fun. But there's a lot of really cool covers out there for the book, and I think it would be kind of nice to have that, a collection of all those cool covers. Um, I should have pulled some things like off the shelves. Marvel Comics that had a Frankenstein comic that started as an adaptation of the book for however many issues. Then it was a continuation of the story after he ran off on the ice floe. And then they froze him like Captain America, and he woke up in modern day. And he's actually been, I don't know if you know Marvel movies or TV shows or any Marvel stuff, but he's actually been an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Oh, really?
Because back in World War II, there was Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos, which was him and his group fighting Nazis. And they've relatively recently had these sort of Shield's Howling Commandos, and it's been the Frankenstein monster, Werewolf by Night, the Living Mummy, usually like some sort of gill man creature, but they've put together a monster squad essentially to fight evil. And I have a board game called Abominations: The Heir to Frankenstein, I believe is the title. It takes place after the events of the book, and this mysterious benefactor has hired the best scientists to continue the work of Dr. Frankenstein. Now, the mysterious benefactor is the monster, but in the game, you gather body parts and try to bring them to life. And it's not super complicated, but a little, because fresh body parts will last longer than not so fresh body parts. You can get ice to make them last longer, but you can, if there's an execution, you can get that corpse immediately, and that's going to be very fresh. You can go to the medical school. Those aren't quite as fresh. And there is a place where you can go and commit murder to get the freshest body parts, but then the police are going to come after you.
It sounds kind of like that just kind of reminds me of Grand Theft Auto, where the more naughty things you do, you get the police after you.
Yeah, there's like these 3 dials with arrows on them that you're trying to raise your points on these different things, and I believe one is humanity, but there are certain things like murder that will lower your humanity, which is not good for you at the end of the game. But it's a lot of fun, and you actually there's 2 leg pieces, 2 arm pieces, a torso, and a head, and they have sort of the unfleshy side and then the fleshy side, and you're gathering bone, blood, marrow, and skin. I don't know. I think there's 4 things you need, and it's I like it. I think it's a lot of fun because, and again, I just love Frankenstein and I love the Frankenstein monster. Couldn't watch the Kenneth Branagh movie though. Just couldn't do it.
Again, it's the way we said in the podcast that we did. It's the first half hour of the movie is costume drama. It had nothing to do with the story. It was just it's messy. It gets good in parts. Like casting Robert De Niro as the monster was a genius move because they'd originally wanted Arnold Schwarzenegger to play the parts. And I can't get that out of my brain how horrible that would be because of the depth of emotion needed for that character. They needed a serious actor to take that on.
Yeah.
And the scene where after the blind man's family has beaten him and chased him out of the house, he's curled up under a tree and sobbing. And it's just a hideously humanizing scene that he does beautifully with.
Yeah. As much as I don't like that the classic Universal movie isn't a very good adaptation of the book, I still think it's a great movie, if that makes sense.
It's a great movie because they do, with the time that they're allotted and with all the restrictions that they had with movie making back then, they were still able to convey sympathy onto the monster.
Yes.
And they did it in the second one too. There's a lot of sympathy that you end up feeling for that monster despite the things that he does. I think Universal always did a really good job. They took him on a weird ride though with when they started, Bela Lugosi was the monster in one of the movies. He was Igor before that. It went weird, and then Abbott Costello started coming in. He went on a weird ride, but when Boris Karloff was the monster, I think that they handled it just delicately enough to convey the point that you're supposed to get.
Yeah. I have a book somewhere. I think it's called Untold Horror, and it's about horror movies that never got made. And the first chapter is about a bunch of Universal horror movies that maybe got to pre-production or were planned, scripts were written, and for one reason or another never came to fruition. And somewhere in that chapter there, it mentions some books that I want to find. Apparently you can get like the script for a Bela Lugosi Frankenstein monster movie. Or just like some of these movies that the scripts were written and just never got made, but they've published the scripts. And I think that's fascinating. And again, should have pulled it.
There's a bookstore in LA that specializes in things like that. I can't imagine it wouldn't be online by now, at least that arm of the business, but that's a really neat idea. I would love to get my hands on some stuff like that.
And they're on Amazon. It's a publisher has put them out.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like a specialty thing. I just so that book is buried at the bottom of a pile of books somewhere. So I don't have easy access to it. But that book itself, Untold Horror, I loved. Because I love all that behind the scenes stuff and everything, and it just sequels that never got made. I think it talks about all the permutations that like Freddy versus Jason went through, and some Texas Chainsaw stuff. I'm trying to remember. Anyway, we were talking about Frankenstein. I'm getting off track.
We're talking about movies. You're not off track.
Yeah, we're talking about whatever we want to talk about. This is my show. I can do what I want. And one of the things I thought we could do, but it's probably not a good idea. I was kind of hoping we could like trash talk all the people that are at AuthorCon this weekend. But as far as I know, they're all wonderful people, and I'm just upset that I'm not there. And by the time this interview airs, AuthorCon will be over, so it wouldn't matter anyway. Um,
They're all
now,
up there having a great time. They're having a great time and selling books and posting lots of lovely, jealousy-inducing pictures on social media.
I've already seen a bunch of people posting pictures of their tables and just magnifying the picture and go, want it, got it, want it, got it, want it. That place would break me, but that is still my holy grail of conventions. One of the scares that cares.
It's a
Conventions.
great place to go. Like their vendor room, just straight up, everything in there is always fantastic. A lot of these places you go to, they want to make the main focus the actors, which it draws people in. Great idea. But Scares That Care, because of Brian Keene, they really bring in amazing authors. The celebrity room always has really fantastic authors in there. Authors are well represented in the vendor room. You know, I've done a few events where it's mostly people selling old toys and like two authors there. Nobody stops at the author table. Everybody's there to buy the toys, and not at Scares. They treat the authors really, really well there.
That's great. I loved. Well, the first time I went to Horror Hound weekend, Sam Hain still had a table there, so I got to meet some great people. The second time I went, Sam Hain was no longer had a table and might not have been around anymore. But Glenn Rolfe still like made the trek with a backpack full of books, and I got to hang out with him for a little while. But we have a convention close to me twice a year called Cinema Wasteland, and that's 99% movies.
Yeah.
Occasionally an author, except for the one amazing exception when they had Jack Ketchum.
Really?
Yes. I got to meet Jack. I had him sign a book that he was not happy to sign, which was the skeleton cheerleader cover of
And
The
the
Girl
girl
Next
next
Door.
door.
Yes. And I had him sign some other stuff, and he had copies of the novel, just photocopied copies of the novel Offspring with his notes, and then a photocopied copy of the script for Offspring with his notes.
That's awesome.
Obviously not originals, but yeah, I picked those up because that's just, again, any type of behind the scenes thing and being able to go through and see what he jotted down. He was wonderful. I was so happy to meet him, and it was just, he even commented that it was just weird. He was the only writer there, and everybody's there to see all the celebrities, all the actors and directors and everything. I made a beeline for his table. Absolutely wanted to meet Jack Ketchum. May I ask why you aren't at AuthorCon?
I have young kids, and this time of year school is still going on, and it's kind of a long drive, and it's a drive that a lot of us, you want to be down there on Thursday. The con technically starts Friday, early evening, late afternoon, but we like to get there on Thursday to commiserate with each other. It's like a family reunion. I couldn't make it with my kids because of the pandemic. I'm homeschooling, and I can't make the drive in April.
All right. Yeah, like I said, someday I'm gonna make it.
I'll be at the July Scares That Care, the regular charity weekend. I'll be there.
Most likely that's not the day I'm gonna make it, but someday. So I need to. It's a catch-22. If I want to have the money to go to Scares of the Care, I have to stop buying books, and I'm not going to stop buying books because that's just crazy talk.
You go there to buy books. That's the thing. Like, what I'll do is I'll vend and I'll sell books Friday, Saturday, half a Sunday, by the time it's ending, it's winding down, I'm going around to the other authors and buying their books. I'm spending everything I just made.
Yeah. Well, it's that and getting the time off work.
Yeah.
But I will do it someday. All right. Let's see. Was there anything else I wanted to bring up before we get to the main event? YouTube. The last video I remember you posting was the one saying that you weren't going to be posting that often, if I'm not mistaken.
It's weird that you're actually bringing this up. I had to step away from it because of all these side things that I'm doing. Like, I keep trying, because, I mean, I gotta tell you, social media has not been great lately. Everybody's kind of losing it, which in part I understand, and I don't want to be a part of it for the most part. I peek in every now and then, but a lot of the people that I'm close to, I have their phone numbers. We sit and text. And it's just not been worth it watching everybody kind of eat each other online. So I stepped away from social media because it was becoming too much for me. This is a place that is still good for a lot of people. It's still good for community for a lot of people, just not for me personally. So I've been doing all these other projects so nobody forgets me because the pandemic really took a bite out of my creativity. There was the stress of that. There was the stress of, my husband's been home all day. My kids have been home. We've all been in this house together. And I just feel like all I'm doing is cooking and washing dishes and doing laundry. That's all I've been doing this entire pandemic. So my creativity took a huge hit. I haven't put out anything. So I was trying to find a way of something that wouldn't take terribly long, but kind of keep me out there. And the truth of the matter is I enjoy talking about other people's stuff more than I enjoy talking about my own works. I have a very high level of discomfort talking about my own works just because I'm like that. I have to be annoying somehow. So I love talking about books. I might be a horror creator, but I'm a horror fan. First and foremost, always and forever. I love talking about books. I love talking about horror movies. It's my favorite thing. And my kids were like, why don't you make a YouTube channel? No. And then someone else was like, why don't you make a YouTube channel? Absolutely not. Because I have anxiety issues attached to having people look at me, being seen, which is really hard when you do conventions because, hi, I'm selling my own books. Here I am. But you have to kind of become a nerd to that. You have to get used to it and get over it. So I was like, okay, I'll start a YouTube channel. And I mean, I've also got these 2 podcasts that I do with the YouTube channel. Nobody is really watching the YouTube videos. And no matter how how hyper and spazzy I get, no matter how excited I get, I'm just here to talk about books and movies and be excited about it. And there are better sources for it, let's be honest. So it wasn't paying off the time that I was putting into it. And with everything starting to wind down with the pandemic, my kids are going back to public school next year. I have to start creating again. I have to start putting out books. And I actually had a book that I was finishing up, and I had to be able to devote more time to it. So the YouTube video thing was falling to the wayside, but the book has been finished and will be turned in within the next day or so. And I actually plan to make another YouTube video coming up, like talking about my bookshelves, what's on my bookshelves, bragging a little bit about my collection.
Nice. Excuse me. Now, if I'm not mistaken, and occasionally I am, I believe I just read a short story of yours in a little anthology called Slash Her.
Huh? You did. I was in that. Yep.
So you have been, there is stuff of yours out there in the world, coming out
Yes.
in the world. Unfortunately, I don't, what was the title? Which one was yours?
You're Dying Up There.
Yes, I really enjoyed that one.
Thank you.
Well, I enjoyed most of it. It was, in my review, I basically said, like every anthology I've ever read. This has its ups and downs, but this is one that's the downs are still good. It's just that the ups are really, really good. I don't think there were any bad stories in it. But yeah, I liked yours a lot.
I like working with Kendisha Press. This was my second time working with them. And, sometimes people don't want you being silly when you're writing horror. They don't want the silly. They don't want chocolate in their peanut butter. They don't want humor with their horror. And Candisha's always been like, no, let us have it. They've been really supportive of me being ridiculous.
Nice. Well, I don't know. I like every type of horror. I don't know that there's a type I really don't enjoy. I like funny horror. I mean, love Jeff Strand.
Yep, Jeff Strand's great.
3 of my favorite anthologies are the Blood Light, the 3 Blood Light books, which are all horror comedy. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I understand some people just don't enjoy that sort of thing, but I dig it. Sometimes I want, something extreme, and sometimes I want something that's lighthearted.
Yeah.
So, all right. Um, can you tell us anything about this work that's being submitted in a day or two?
It's long. So I've almost solely done novellas up until this point. The longest book that I've written and published so far has been about 56,000 words. This one is pushing 94,000 words. So it's a typical novel length, but for me, it's a long one.
It's your The Stand. Or it. Okay. All right. Well, I guess we can move on to the main event. Before we jump in, though, I have to do my fake sponsorship. I don't think I was doing that the first time you were on.
I don't think so, no.
I'm trying to get anyone to sponsor me, send me free things. But this plan makes no sense because I'm giving people free publicity. So, but I do it anyway. So my non-sponsor, they are not associated with the show in any way, but my non-sponsor for this episode of My Favorite Horror With is, and I have to show pictures on my phone because I don't actually have this in my possession, but it is Jaws, the board game from Ravensburger Games. And in this game, it's a 1 versus many game. One person is the shark. And then from 1 to 3 players are Brody, Quint, and Hugh Hooper. And it's a 2-part game. The first part of the game, the board is Amity. See if we can, hopefully that shows up. It's Amity, and it's sort of a hidden movement game. The shark is circling the island trying to eat swimmers. And the other players are trying to find the shark and save the swimmers. And then at a certain point, either when they get 2 barrels on the shark, or the shark has eaten, I think, 9 people, might be more, then you flip the board over and you are on the orca. And then the object of the game now is for either the heroes to kill the shark, or the shark can either kill all 3 players or destroy the boat. So if Brody, Quint, and Hooper kill Bruce, they win. If Bruce can kill them or destroy the boat, then Bruce wins.
That sounds really well thought out.
It's a really good game. I had not realized until this afternoon how much it actually mirrors the movie, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But that's Jaws, the board game from Ravensburger. It's a lot of fun, especially if you want to be a shark and eat a bunch of swimmers. So that is the non-sponsor for this episode of My Favorite Horror With, which leads us to the main event, which, of course, we are going to talk about Jaws, but not just the movie, not just the book, We're going to talk about both. Look at that. And I don't have a copy of the movie. I'm going to, oof, this might be a horrible thing to admit to. Until today, I had never watched the movie Jaws from beginning to end. I had seen every part of the movie, but I would always catch the beginning, or I'd catch the end, or I'd catch the middle. I had never watched it beginning to end until today.
I'm thoroughly scandalized right now. How did this happen?
I knew it. I knew I've just blown up my reputation. Oh, goodness. So this was your choice, and you asked if we could talk about both. I don't think we need to give anybody a synopsis. Shark eating people. What else do you need to know? So my first question before we just deep dive into all of this is, why was this your choice?
So it's a complicated answer because it's not just a singular thing. The movie Jaws, I was born in 1983. The movie came out in 1975, so it had been out for a while. It was very well established. I watched this movie all the time as a kid, and I've always adored this movie. But the thing is when it comes to the movie and the book, I'm someone, I always hate movie adaptations of books. I actually love talking about how much I hate movie adaptations because they never get it right. They change things on a whim that makes no sense. And like, I get that it's a completely different storytelling medium, but the directors always are wanting to tell a different story than the person who wrote the book. However, I think Jaws is one of the very rare instances, in my opinion, where the movie is better than the book.
I can completely see that.
It's something that almost never happens in my universe. I always like the book better, but I think the movie, especially for a broad audience, and that's not to say the book isn't good. That's not the case at all. But there's a lack of likable characters in the book, whereas the movie is nothing but likable characters. And like even Quint, who's this salty, aggro kind of butthole guy, you still like him. In the book, the character of Quint, he's kind of a nothing burger. He's just the guy with the boat.
Yeah.
And Robert Shaw in the movie just made him, I think aside from the shark, Quint might be he's the character you bring up first. He's the one you think of first because he did such an amazing job with embodying this traumatized seaman.
Yes.
So
yeah.
That's why I wanted to do this one, because it's one of the very rare instances where the movie told the story a little better.
Okay. I don't think I need to warn people about spoilers for the movie, but if you're like me, I only read the book for the first time a couple of years ago. So, spoilers for the book. If you have not read the book, which is quite different than the movie, we're going to get into everything. So, folks, spoiler warnings. If you haven't seen the movie, pause this, go watch the movie. If you want to read the book first, pause this and go read the book. It's not that long.
It's not that thick.
Little thing. And then, come back and watch us discuss it. All right. So, first of all, we're going to have to go on a tangent here. Really, you generally don't like adaptations of books?
Generally, no. This hatred of mine, but it started with Stephen King, because of all the movie adaptations they've done of King's work, there are very few adaptations that even begin to touch on the story that the book was trying to tell. It's always something else, or it's always cut down for time, or it's always this dumbass budget thing that happens. There have been a couple good ones, like Frank Darabont usually doesn't do King dirty, but I mean, a lot of them do. I could rave for years about the It movies, all of them. Leave it alone that one is not meant to be made into a movie. It's just not. If you read the book, it's never going to work in a movie form because there's too much mental stuff that happens. Right. And it's such a good story. And this last one, the first part, at least, it tried. It did. It tried. The second part was so fucking garbage, I can't even think straight, but
I have not seen the second part yet. I bought it on Blu-ray at Target for $7, and I've had a number of people told me I wasted $7.
Have you ever watched a movie and when you were done, you wanted to find the addresses of the people who made it and demand monetary compensation for the time lost in your life?
See, I'm a very maybe forgiving person. As long as I'm entertained, the quality of the movie isn't quite that important. M. Night Shyamalan, maybe. There's some M. Night Shyamalan movies I don't like. But The Happening, horrible movie. I can rewatch it anytime because it entertains me. I can laugh at it.
Mark Wahlberg and that face of his. With that movie in particular, I'm telling you.
Or maybe it's because I think I mention this every time I talk to somebody now. I recently got a new TV. It's my first smart TV, and it's a Samsung. So it has Samsung TV Plus, and one of the channels on there is Riff Tracks.
Oh.
And that is my background noise now. So I'm seeing a lot of bad movies, but they entertain me.
That's the thing. Like there's because horror especially has a long tradition of bad movies. And, on the Ghost Riders, we basically made a show laughing about these movies and occasionally getting mad about them. There are the bad movies that are fun. There are the bad movies that are self-aware and kind of lean into being bad, and they're so much fun. They're so enjoyable. It's the ones that are trying and don't understand the basic tenets of storytelling that make me nuts.
I can see that. Well, I'll give you an example. Again, I keep waiting for you to just hang up on me at any moment. Today's Friday. On Tuesday, I just bought a 6-pack of Children of the Corn movies.
Okay, wait a minute. No, I will never hang up on you for this. When I tell people about my love for bad B movies, I always want to make a point for movies that have too many sequels. Because you get the main gist of the story in the first movie, maybe the first 2 movies. After that, they start going so balls to the wall crazy. Not only with the story, they start getting really creative with the kill scenes in those movies. There's one of the Children of the Corn movies where, and it's always younger people, teenagers and stuff, the teenager running through the corn. And in these movies, the corn magically always has vines, which corn does not have in real life. But in these movies, it does. And the vines, catch the kid's ankle. He falls, face plants, and the vines wrap around his neck and pops his head off. But it is still attached to his spine. So it's like pulling it. He looks like a big Pez dispenser where it's pulling everything up. It's a great scene, great kill scene. They put effort into the effects because they don't have to worry about trying to tell you a story at this point. They're just going crazy with the kill scenes. That's great about these movies that have too many sequels.
Well, it was $13 at Walmart, and it has 2 through 7. I had to get it. But I have a box set of 7 Leprechaun movies. I have a box set of 5 Phantasm movies. I feel the one with 4 or 5, however many Critters movies.
There's another Banana Pants one.
which I believe I saw the original in the theater. And I know I've seen at least the second one and possibly the third one.
I think that's where I'm at. I've definitely seen the first two, maybe the third, but I definitely haven't seen past the third.
But I have most of the Puppet Master movies.
More Banana Pants. Those get crazy.
Well, back when I was, right after high school, way back before your time. Between the time that I graduated high school and went into the Air Force, which was around 2 years, a buddy and I almost every weekend would go to the local video store. We had this little tiny video store. It was owned by a couple of high school teachers that had the best horror section. And once we discovered full moon movies, we would rent 2 or 3 or 4 a weekend and just go nuts watching full moon movies. Absolutely loved them. Unfortunately, the quality of full moon movies has really declined, and they didn't start at Oscar territory to begin with.
Yeah.
But still love those classics. Puppet Masters, Demonic Toys, Seed People. I mean, we were watching all that stuff. Robot Jocks, Crash and Burn, loved it all. But back to adaptations. So, since you brought up Stephen King, Misery, good or bad?
Good.
Okay. I'm going to go with the ones that most people would say are good to start here. Shawshank Redemption.
Good. Again, Frank Darabont. He never did him dirty.
Right. The Mist.
Actually, might be better. Like the ending on that one.
Because of the ending, right?
Better, yep.
All right. Again, hoping not to get hung up on. I actually like the remake of Pet Sematary.
I might hang up.
I hate that they spoiled the big change in the trailers.
Yeah, what is it with movie trailers anymore? They either tell you nothing or everything.
Well, I think I can see it from their perspective, because if they hadn't put that in the trailer, there might have been riots in the theaters when people saw it.
There were almost riots anyway. Just
I didn't think it was horrible.
I wouldn't say horrible. My thinking is unnecessary. They retooled things that they shouldn't have bothered anyway, and it was an unnecessary movie.
I liked the young girl's performance, and I liked the change to the ending. I'm not saying it's better. I'm just saying I enjoyed it.
It's fair. That's fair.
I have that as well as the original on Blu-ray. I've never seen the second one.
Oh, it's not good. Like,
but it has Clancy Brown.
It does, but it also has Edward Furlong, and it's not good.
Yeah. Then you have The Shining. What are your feelings on the Stanley Kubrick version of The Shining?
It's not The Shining.
Okay. Have you seen the miniseries?
I have.
And what do you think about that one?
It's closer to the book. See, okay. The thing that drives me crazy about Kubrick's version of The Shining is how royally he fucked up the character of Jack Torrance. The book, if you like the book at all, I don't understand why you're not raging against that movie, because it's heartbreaking what happens to Jack, the way he degrades in that hotel, because he's not a bad man. He's a bad man he's not a bad man. He's a good man with a bad problem. He has a monkey on his back that he cannot shake. And in Kubrick's version, and I love Jack Nicholson, but Jack Nicholson played Jack Torrance as a bastard from second one. And it's all wrong because of that. You know, Kubrick, with the beautiful symmetrical shots and the great panning and everything, it doesn't make up for the fact that that's not The Shining. With the miniseries with Steven Weber, they made it too touchy-feely. I like it more because it's closer to the book, but with the ending and stuff, like, it's too touchy-feely, it's too mushy. None of them got it right yet.
Okay, I can see that. I've only seen the miniseries once when it first aired. And I liked that it was closer to the book with the croquet mallet
Yep.
and the topiary. And I am a Steven Weber fan. He's in one of my favorites. I am not a fan of musicals, but two of them that I love, Evil Dead the musical and Reefer Madness the musical. Matter of fact, got the soundtrack right here.
Oh, wow.
This is great too because it has the movie soundtrack and the LA performance soundtrack.
Nice.
But it's got Nev Campbell, Christian Campbell, Anna Gasteyer, and Steven Weber plays the drug dealer, and he is so over the top, like 30s sneering, gangsterish kind of the crazy sayings that they say. You were in more laps than a napkin. What does he say? You better put your flaps down and fly right. Just his performance is so fantastic. So anything he's in is going to already get that extra point, that bump for me.
And he does a really good job as Jack. It's not any of the actors. Oh, okay, that's not true. The kid that they got to play Danny, I'm not someone who always hates on child actors, but sometimes child actors get on my nerves, and he's one of them. I mean, he grew up to be a fine young man, but he was not good in this movie as Danny. And that's a big part. It's an important part. And it was too big for him, I think. But Rebecca De Mornay is fantastic in it. Steven Weber's fantastic in it, and they got Jack right in that. It's just that ending. No.
Now, I haven't seen it because I haven't read the book yet, and I want to read the book before I watch the movie. But so, without spoiling anything or whatever, Doctor Sleep. Have you seen that? What do you think?
I've read the book. I have not yet seen the movie.
Okay.
Everybody's yelling at me about the movie. I will get to it someday, I swear. Love the book, and the people who are telling me that the movie's really good are people that I trust.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to it. I'm not going into it with a lot of trepidation like I usually do.
All right, that's good to hear. Yeah, I just haven't gotten to the book yet, and like I said, want to read that before I see the movie.
It's a good book.
Well, I there's a huge gap in my Stephen King reading because after Misery, I started to I couldn't get into anything else that I tried to read from him, and I don't know if I was just burned out. I started Gerald's Game, couldn't get into it. Started The Dark Half, couldn't get into it, and just got to a point where I gave up, and I didn't really come back until Under the Dome. And then I loved Under the Dome, and even that wasn't to the point where I was grabbing everything he was putting out immediately again until The Outsider. So just a few years ago. And now I'm back on that train, with the exception of Billy Summers, S at the end, I don't know, which I have not grabbed yet because I keep hearing mixed things, but I've grabbed and read everything he's done since The Outsider, and I'm going back and reading the stuff that I didn't get to read when I wasn't picking everything up. And I used to say, I don't know if we've talked about this, I used to say The Pet Sematary was the most boring book I'd ever read for decades. And then I reread it a couple years ago, and now it's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it.
It's one of his, for someone who writes as much as King does and never really shies away from certain topics like he does, I think that's one of his more brutal books. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't write it to be over the top in that way. It's devastating. And that's something that King is really good at, and I don't think he gets enough credit for. You're heartbroken when things happen in his books. Yes. Sometimes. And Pet Sematary is one of those. You are a pile of just emotions and goo when you're done with that book.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why the first time I read it, which was back in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. I mean, maybe I wasn't in the right mindset. I don't know. But I just thought it was horribly boring. Could not stand it.
I think a lot of people fall off the King train for a little bit because he's so consistent. He puts out a lot of stuff consistently. And I think you do reach a point where it's like, I got to take a break from you. See, I fell off around Under the Dome. I never got around to reading that. I have to go back and do it. I came back around Bag of Bones, and Bag of Bones was the one that pulled me back in. And I'm going slow now because I'm reading lots of other stuff, but Bag of Bones was the one that where I was like, oh, I remember why I loved him.
Well, there's tons I have to get. I was for a while concentrating. I'm kind of looking over at my stack of the mass market paperbacks, and I was trying to get the old covers. Like I wanted to make sure I read The Stand for the first time just at the beginning of the pandemic. But I made sure I got that black cover that's got the raven face superimposed over the person face.
Yep.
Because that's the cover I remember from when I was growing up. I just got a copy of It. That's the old paperback copy that has the sewer opening and the little paper boat.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it's a little beat up, and I don't think I'm going to be able to read that copy, so I might have to buy another copy just for a reading copy.
Yeah.
But and now that I've discovered my favorite Stephen King character of all time, I'm incredibly excited about his next book. Because after reading, well, are you all caught up on like his recent stuff? I don't want to spoil anything.
I've been going slow on the recent stuff because I got to be honest, I haven't loved a lot of it.
Okay. Did you read The Outsider?
I did.
Okay. It sounds like you didn't love it.
I hated it.
Really?
And I'll tell you why. The first third of that book, I maintain, is probably some of the best writing of his whole career. The first third.
Okay.
The last 2/3 were a very steep decline for me. And even the last page, I hurled a curse word at the book when I read the last page. It fell apart for me in a big way because there was more promise than delivery with that first third.
That I can see that, but that book introduced me to my favorite Stephen King character, who is Holly Gibney. And I know some people don't like that character. I absolutely love her. I immediately, after reading that, went out and bought the the Bill Gaines trilogy. Is that his name? Mr. Mercedes. Mr. Mercedes. I can't remember the name of the other two off the top of my head, but it's the books that introduced her.
Mm-hmm.
And he announced that his next book is going to be Holly. It's going to be a Holly Gibney novel. I'm so excited. I absolutely love that character. What about, did you read The Institute?
I did.
What'd you think of that one?
I think a lot of it is recycled. Like, I think that story in pieces has been told before in other books. That's a lot of Stephen King tropes jammed into one book.
That might be why I liked it so much, because I love government experimenting on kids with powers stories.
Mm-hmm.
And it gave me that Firestarter feeling, which I've kind of missed.
Firestarter was never my favorite, but Firestarter, because it was smaller scale, it wasn't so many kids, I liked better because you could attach to a character a little easier. With The Institute, there were a lot of people, and you had the adult trying to do the right thing. I don't know. I was reading it. I didn't hate it. I was just like, this has all been done before by him.
I can see that. I just think, like I said, I think a lot of it for me was nostalgia. Like I said, I like that kind of story. I love the movie, The Fury, which was De Palma's follow-up to Carrie.
Yep.
Which I've never read the book, but I grew up watching the movie over and over on HBO.
isn't that based on a John Ferris book, not a King book?
Yeah, it's John Ferris.
Yeah.
But I was going with the government.
Oh, I gotcha. All right. That's a good book. I remember the movie a little bit, but again, I like the book better.
I have not read the book.
It's a good book.
But yeah, so I was just comparing that to like Firestarter, The Fury, The Institute are all in the same class.
I gotcha.
And it's a class that I like. All right, we got way off. We're supposed to be talking about Jaws. That's on me.
That's fine.
I diverted us. So let's get into Jaws. And if you don't mind, would you mind taking the lead on this discussion?
Sure. So something that I've encountered, which is weird, is it seems like everybody's seen the movie. You can talk about this and everybody knows what you're talking about. I've met people who don't like classifying Jaws as a monster movie, which, you know, some of these people are very eloquent and very smart. They're just wrong. It is a monster movie. Now, if you read the book, there's no room for debate at all. It is very nakedly a monster book. This shark, because you get the reveal, and that's something that's very important with monster tales. And it happens in the movie too. They just did it by accident. You get the big monster reveal. It always happens that way. And he does it in the book. Peter Benchley made sure you don't meet the shark for a while. You keep finding the remnants of what washes up from the shark. And it's really graphic. Like, something that's crazy about the movie, how scary and horrifying it is in how little it shows. And Spielberg has done master classes on less is more when you show it, because what you're imagining is much scarier than what an effects department is going to be able to show you. The book is horrifying in the details, the things that wash up, the pieces that are left behind, the wounds that they find. And there's no wonder why these people overreact like they do. Now, one of the villains of the movie is the mayor of Amity. So, and people have fun really ripping on this guy because he is the local bureaucracy. And I cannot tell you how many people I've said, read the book, you'll understand where he's coming from more. Because Peter Benchley does a fantastic job talking about, in a very layman's terms, talking about the economy of Amity Island. It is an island all on its own. It is not attached to a mainland. You have to take a ferry to get places. So things like telephone calls. This is 1974 when the book came out. Telephone calls were expensive. Specific groceries were expensive. If you wanted to buy a new pair of shoes, that had to be brought in. This was not stuff that was, there were no Walmarts on Amity Island. And their entire economy depended on two things: fishing and tourism. Their vacationers were their lifeblood. And he had so many people breathing down his neck over closing the beaches, because that would mean there would be no money. We're not talking about big conglomerates closing down their Holiday Inn hotels. These were local small business owners where if the vacationers were not allowed in, they don't eat for the winter. It's that simple. There's no bankruptcy. There's no, oh, we don't get to keep the 80-foot yacht this time. It's, we don't eat. And it's a lot more nuanced in the book than it is in the movie. He is just outright shown to be a bureaucratic butthole.
But didn't he, in the book, didn't he also owe people money?
Did he? It's been a little while for me, but I don't remember that. I remember he's still very much a politician, but I don't remember that. I just remember it's not as simple as he doesn't want to admit that there's something bad going on in his town.
Right. But I and it's been a couple of years since I read it, but I feel like he was getting phone calls from people that wanted their money. I could be wrong about that. Hope maybe someone in the comments who's read it more recently or remembers it. Because that was one of the two huge differences, I thought, between the book and the movie. The other one being, see, you said the the book is absolutely a monster story. I'm not sure it is. It might just be a melodrama because it seems like a third of the book is taken up with uh, Brody's wife.
There's a lot of her in it, and again, when we're talking about characterization, the likable characters are in the movie. There aren't really likable characters in the book. If you're going to pick a character that maybe you like, it's Brody, but Hooper is a horrible person, which is surprising because Richard Dreyfuss really played him as maybe a little pompous, but
Yes.
ultimately right about everything, and likable.
Yes.
Again, Robert Shaw played Quint as difficult but likable. Roy Scheider really pulled off Brody as likable. Now, there's a difference with Brody because in the movie, he and his wife, they're outsiders. They're from New York City. They're not from Amity. In the book, Brody himself, he is an islander. He's always lived there, and he married a city girl. She was a New York vacationer who came and fell in love with him, and they have this very, very humble, simple life that sometimes she's not always okay with.
Yeah.
And well, it really starts coming out when Hooper comes around, because Hooper is a big city money guy, and she had dated his older brother when she was younger, I seem to think.
That I don't recall.
I think they knew each other because she had known his brother, but then...
Yeah, that does sound right. But yeah, and this is I think possibly the biggest spoiler for anyone who hasn't read the book. Maybe that she goes and has an affair. Is it an affair if it's a one-time thing?
I mean, that depends. I think Brody would have considered it an affair. It's an indiscretion for sure.
It's a fling.
But we got to talk about the baby powder. Like, okay, again, born in '83, but why the hell is she putting baby powder in everything? She I don't know if she worked or volunteered at the hospital, but they had arranged a meeting and she had put in a shift, and she goes into this public bathroom to change her clothes to go and meet him, and she puts baby powder everywhere. She puts baby powder inside of her underclothes. She puts baby powder all over her body. She puts baby powder in her shoes. And I don't know I don't know what sources Peter Benchley was working on, but she's going to look like she's covered in pancake batter if she's sweating.
Well, I was going to say it's to absorb the nervous sweat, but yeah, it's just going to paste up.
Gross. But yeah, they end up having this one-time thing, which she didn't really enjoy anyway because Hooper's weird and intense. And I think the big spoiler is actually who ends up making it and who doesn't at the end.
Okay. Not that Brody punches Hooper in the face.
And that Quint's the one who has to step in and calm them down. Quint's the calming person in this scenario.
Okay, so let's spoil who survives.
Brody. Does Quint survive? Oh my god, I don't remember. Hooper doesn't. The shark bites Hooper into 3 pieces.
I'm going to take a quick look. It is such an abrupt ending in the book.
It is.
It looks like it's just Brody. Right, there's Quint. Yeah, Quint's dead. Yeah, so it looks like Brody's the only one. And it just sort of ends. It's like, and he started kicking for sure.
Yeah.
Just kind of how the movie ends, but yeah, there's so many things I noticed watching it again. Well, watching it from start to finish for once. And it's funny because just as I was starting the movie, I was thinking about, this movie would be great if it just starts with that iconic theme, and it actually does.
Yep.
But I did notice, I think there's this weird thing with the music, because you have that iconic sort of terrifying theme, and then there are moments when they're out on the water, where it's this like adventure music.
Yeah.
It's very, very upbeat and like, hey, we're on an adventure, even though a bunch of people have been eaten by this shark.
But they're on Martha's Vineyard, and it's beautiful up there, and like that's where the movie was filmed, and they get really beautiful shots of them on the water.
Oh
and
yeah.
You listen to all the trouble that they went through trying to get those shots because other people were out vacationing and they're out in their little sailboats and they kept appearing in the background, and it's just they get really great shots. And there's also the when the boys are on the boat, you know, the gang's together and they're off and they're on their mission and hopes are high, and you know the goal is set out and they're gonna go do it. You know, I like that upbeat music because ultimately everything goes completely and totally to shit.
Yes.
And for all the things that they don't show, the death of Quint in the movie is awful. Like, oh my god, when that shark finally bites down on his middle, like it's gotten his legs and he's screaming, but when that shark finally gets up and bites down on his middle and Robert Shaw spits that blood, it's a fantastic scene.
Yes. There's, I mean, just so many amazing and iconic shots in this. I think this Spielberg kid might go places. You have the, I don't know what it's called, but I know the move, the iconic shot of Brody with his wife behind him. And I know they do it by zooming the lens in while pulling the camera back, or I may have that reversed.
It's a crazy shot.
And I can't remember what it's like a push zoom or a pull zoom, something like that, that's how you get that change in field, depth of field.
Mm-hmm.
That's iconic. And the shot of Quint perfectly centered, standing on the bow with the gun, and he's just relaxing, and it's perfectly symmetrical. It's just a beautiful shot. It's silhouette because the sun is behind him setting. Amazing shot there. Of course, everybody, I say everybody, but I'm sure there's someone who doesn't know when Brody's chumming the water and just kind of being a smart ass, and then the shark pops up, which of course is when he slowly backs into the cabin and says, "You're going to need a bigger boat."
An ad-lib line from Roy Scheider, by the way, which I think is great because that shark is way too big for that boat. But another scene that, you know, it's not iconic for filmmaking's sake, but for the viewer. When we're talking about effectiveness for the viewer, a scene that's always gotten me is the scene when the shark is in the pond.
Yes.
And it's the fishermen, and that their boats have flipped over, and it's a second you see the shark pulling up on the guy and opening its mouth. Yep. That scene is so effective for, you know, as the viewer, if you're kind of going, that's perfect. And like that scene is always kind of like
Well, I love the scene when is it Mrs. Kintner, when her son, I believe his name's Alex, is killed.
Alex Kittner.
Because, you know, he's out on that floaty raft, and we see, you know, there's the music and the typical shots, shark view and all that. And then we just sort of, just the way the shark flips, and all you see is fins sort of spinning and the raft go down and then a plume of blood.
So
I love that shot.
I don't know when it changed. So I grew up watching Jaws on like TBS and TNT. They would show it on weekends all the time as a kid. So there was a lot that I didn't see, but I know that originally there were issues with the Alex Kittner death scene, and they didn't want to show certain parts. And for a while there, it was the shark kind of rolling around and the blood, and you would see the thing wash up. They have, like, the DVD version that I have shows, like, there's Alex kind of jumping out of the water, and you see him get dragged down. It's not graphic or anything, but it is the death of a child. A lot of U.S. movie making does try to shine, like, it shies away from that. But I remember the first time I saw that on the DVD, I was like, I've never seen that before.
I think that's it. I watched it on Amazon Prime.
Mm-hmm.
I think he does a little jumping up and down.
It's like a millisecond that you
Yeah.
actually see him, but they wouldn't show it before.
I do have a little trivia. I have to look on my IMDb to get um, my information correct here. Come on. So the first person to die in the movie is Chrissy, I believe, is her name. Where is it? Yes, played by Susan Baccalini, I believe is how you pronounce it. And I just happened to look this up last weekend, or happened to see some trivia about her. So she's the first person to die in this. She is in the movie Day of the Animals, which is one of my favorite animal attack movies. She is the first person to die in that as well. And she's an animal trainer,
Oh,
or was. And she reprises her Jaws role in, is it 1941? The Spielberg comedy about World War II? Except that instead of a shark, it's a Japanese submarine that comes up underneath her. Um, but yeah, I just happened to watch Day of the Animals last weekend and was looking at some of the trivia and saw that she was the first person to die in Jaws and then the first person to die in Day of the Animals. I happen to like animals eating people.
a lot of people do.
I dig it. Um, One of my favorite scenes in the movie is when Brody and his youngest son, whose name I don't remember, are at the kitchen table and his son is mimicking him. That's just such a beautiful, just a wonderful moment. It's so human.
It's so Spielberg. Spielberg always puts those little things in, those little affectionate things in his movies that, especially with family members, to show their closeness, to show their bond.
And I'm not a huge Spielberg fan. There are Spielberg movies I love, Spielberg movies I don't like. So he's just sort of there. But yeah, he can do scenes like that. And um, I think one of Brody's best scenes that shows his character is when Mrs. Kintner comes up to him and slaps him and says essentially, "My son is dead because of you."
Yep.
And he very easily could have told her, "I wanted to close the beaches. The mayor and the politicians wanted to leave them open." But he doesn't do that. He just stands there, he lets her vent, and lets her go on her way.
He also doesn't feel that. Like, you get the sense, his sense of duty is deeper than that of the other leaders of Amity. They would be happy to pass the buck. They would be happy to let anybody else wear the blame. As the chief of police, because of his position, regardless of what he says behind closed doors, part of the blame is his, and he understands that, which is why he's a character with so much integrity and why he's so likable. It's not so much so in the book. He's kind of whiny in the book. But I mean, in the movie, he has a lot of integrity.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so we're kind of jumping around, but again, who hasn't seen this movie? um, can you think of any other major changes between the book and the movie that are important?
Like, he and his wife don't have a great relationship
Mm-hmm.
in the book. In the movie, they do. They have a really good, close relationship. Um, it's just the characters are much more likable in the movie than in the book. There's that whole scene in the book, like, it's not important to this conversation, but I'm gonna say it anyway because I think about it all the time. That whole where she makes that really nice lamb dinner, and there's this very subtle thing going on where she's trying really hard to impress Hooper, and she's making it very known to Brody that she's unhappy, that she feels that she's settled for him. And he gets it, like, he's catching all of this. And he gets kind of drunk, and he's sitting there drinking and getting drunk. And she puts this, if you Lamb is a very fatty, kind of greasy meat anyway, and she sets it in front of him, and he's sitting there trying really hard not to puke all over her nice table because she put up such a fuss making this fancy dinner. I think about that all the time about him having this very complainy, depressing realization that his wife is not happy with him, all the while trying not to puke on a piece of lamb.
Well, I think my impression was the yeah, she fell in love and thought that this is what the life she wanted, and she's unhappy living the small town life. She misses the city, she misses the society, and Hooper is that chance to live it for a short time again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the fancy dinner and everything. And it's that turning her back on the small town that she's feels she's trapped in.
Yeah. There's also
Uh,
one more kid. In the movie, they have two sons. In the book, there's three kids. One of them's a daughter.
Now, so was it lamb that Hooper in the movie? Hooper comes in and just grabs that plate. Is anybody eating this?
I
Is that
don't,
lamb?
I don't know if you ever get a good look at it. I just remember the wine that Brody, like, there's already something in the glass, like water or something, and he just fills it up with wine.
Yeah, Hooper brings 2 bottles of wine, white and red, because I didn't know what you were serving, which makes it sound like he was invited, but he wasn't,
Nope, he just
apparently.
showed up.
He just shows up, and then he sits down. It's just so funny. He just sits down, and they're talking. He's like, there's a plate, like a full plate. Like, no one is eating anything off of it. It looks like.
He
Anybody eating this? And he just grabs it and starts eating.
he comes off a lot like a graduate student in the movie. He's very like, picture a graduate student and that's him. He does such a good job.
Do you know how old he's supposed to be in the movie?
I don't.
Because
And
I
he's younger in the book too. He's quite a bit younger than uh Mrs. Brody. I can't remember their first names. Martin is Brody's first name. I can't remember her first name, but he's quite a bit younger than her.
he if I did my math correctly, Richard Dreyfuss was 28 at the time the movie came out, so maybe 27 when they filmed. Um, but I felt the character. I mean, everybody kept calling him kid, youngster, whatever. So I felt that he was mid-20s at most. The character,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know.
I don't know. They don't really talk about it. Like, you get the. Doesn't he say he's a student? When he first introduced it, it happens really fast. I've always assumed he was a student. I could be wrong.
Yeah,
I've seen this movie
I
500 times. I don't know,
feel
but
like that is the case. But I'm used to old Richard. I'm used to what about Bob Richard Dreyfuss? Um,
completely different performance.
absolutely. Um, or well, apparently poor Hooper dies in Piranha, um, 3D, Double D, whatever the Piranha remake was. I think it's Piranha 3D.
I think
Have you seen that one?
I've only seen the first one.
The one by Alexander Aja, or however you say his name.
Mm-mm.
Um, with Jerry O'Connell is in it. Oh crap! Adventures in Babysitting actress.
Elizabeth Shue.
Yes, she's in it. Ving Rhames, bunch of people. But it starts with an unnamed character played by Richard Dreyfuss. But everything and every behind the scenes thing, basically, it's like, yeah, that's Hooper.
Aw.
That's Hooper. He, spoilers, is the first person to get eaten by piranha.
Well,
And
he was supposed to
yeah,
die in the movie, but they saved him. So
this is the demise of who. It's kind of that unofficial kind of thing.
I appreciate that.
Um, yeah. There's this movie is masterpiece too much? Calling it a masterpiece?
No, because you know what? there are a lot of movies, a lot of horror movies made in 1975 that we laugh about now. There are a lot that we still hold dear. Like, we horror people hold our classics as sacred. And the 70s were a good year, good decade for the horror classics. And I think Jaws is one that gets overlooked sometimes because it's Spielberg, because it's, you got John Williams music billowing in the back. But this is a movie that has inspired my lifelong fear of deep, dark water. And I think, because a lot of us grew up watching it on TBS, there was a lot you didn't see. And because of the cute little rivalry between Hooper and Quint, the crushing of the beer can and the styrofoam cup,
Yes,
and it's such a cute
love
little
that.
scene. And it
So
is,
good.
and Quint's speech about the Indianapolis and all of that, there are parts of it that you don't remember as being horror, but it is. It really is. There's something of that opening scene with her swimming, and you see her feet,
Mhm.
and her feet are the first things that are going to get the bite, and it's so anxiety inducing, because that scares me anyway. If you've ever been in water, deep water, where there are other things in there with you, and you're not touching, you're just treading, and something touches your feet, it's instantly terrifying, instantly. And I don't think Masterpiece is overstating it, and I think it is one of the foundational pieces of modern horror.
It, yeah, definitely a classic. Um, Now, personally, I've always loved sharks. I think they're beautiful creatures. Um, from the great white to the mako to the hammerhead. Hammerhead, such a cool looking animal. So cool. Love sharks. I have been swimming in two oceans. Never got attacked by a shark or anything else. Um, yeah, just a fantastic movie. Um, Not as fantastic a book, but well worth the read,
Yep.
I would say. Quite a bit different in parts. I feel like a third of that book is just Mrs. Brody and
Maybe not
and
a
and
third, but too much of
it's
it. Too much of
it's
it is about her feelings and
there's
her
a chunk.
regrets, and
There's a chunk that's just her going off to have her fling.
yeah.
Um Man, there was I know I'm forgetting like so many things that I really should take notes when I watch these movies because there were just things popping up and I'm like, "Oh, we should talk about that." Um just the relationships in the movie. And as you said, the again, an iconic scene when they're showing scars
Hmm.
and competing, having their scar competition. And Hooper's like, right here, right here. They don't see anything. And he's like, so and so, I don't remember her name, broke my heart.
And they're all stinking drunk. They're all
Yeah.
slobbering all over themselves.
And then Quint's got to bring him down with his story about the USS Indianapolis, which is a horrifying tale.
Yeah.
But then it cuts to them drunkenly singing and just bonding. And at the beginning, Quint didn't want Hooper. Thought he was just this rich city boy.
Hmm.
And it was and again, by the end, they're drinking together, they're singing together, and then they're sinking together.
Yeah.
um so yeah, the way Spielberg builds the relationships. I never looked at who wrote the screenplay. Let's see, Carl Gottlieb, and that's what it says. Peter Benchley's screenplay and based on the novel by, and then Carl Gottlieb. Um, and then I never know how much the director changes things, and of course, editing changes things. Um, so unless it's, for me anyway, unless it's a writer director, someone directing their own screenplay, how much of it is Spielberg, how much of it is Peter Benchley and Carl Gottlieb?
I know that Carl Gottlieb is the one who wrote the Indianapolis speech, that whole thing. And it was very last minute. There was a lot of kind of bootstrapping this movie. There's kind of a story, and I don't know if it's true or not, but they say that Steven Spielberg would sleep with a piece of celery under his pillow, and he would sit and gnaw on it in anxiety. Like he apparently just sweat every second of making this movie because everything kept going wrong.
I mean, famously, the reason we don't see the shark very much is because they could not get it to work.
They built it and they tested it in fresh water, and then surprise, surprise, it would not work in salt water. And they just had a bitch of a time getting the shots. But it is that thing. The less you see of this very obviously rubber shark, the better.
Yes. And it worked with between the music and just seeing the fin, it builds that tension.
Yep.
It builds that terror. And I love seeing the shark at the end. And we do get a little bit of it here and there.
Mm-hmm.
As you said earlier, in the pond, as they called it, with the when it comes up on the guy that fell out of his boat. But yeah, I still feel like there's things that I wanted to mention that have just flown out of my head.
Well, there's the scene with once they get all of these sort of headhunters coming in, all these just kind of redneck boat guys
Good
want to
old
come
boys.
in, and they want to gather the prize. They want to get the shark, and they end up killing innocent sharks. Not that, Jaws, despite what the movie would have you say, it's an animal that is doing what sharks do in the water. But when these guys are on a pier late at night and they cook, the wife's holiday roast and throw it in,
Yes.
and the shark tears apart this pier, and the guy's in the water, and the pier starts coming back, and his friend goes, "Don't look back, swim, don't look back, don't look back." That scene is so great. That guy saying, "Don't look back," is the scariest thing he could have said.
Yeah. And just the fact that the pier goes in the other direction is horrifying.
Yeah.
Because, the shark takes the bait and rips, as you said, rips the pier off, and it's going away from these guys, and the one guy's falling in the water. It's going away. Fight, great, keep going that. But then, and all you see is the pier. You never see the shark. The pier's going out, and then all of a sudden it's coming back, and that's holy shit. That thing turned around and is coming right back for us.
Yep.
Fantastic, just great filmmaking. Why did he have to go and make Ready Player One? Come on. There's my dig at Spielberg. Yeah, it's just all the little pieces fit and they work. And even the mayor has his moment. I think in the hospital after that pond scene.
Yeah.
And Brody's son is in shock, and he's telling the mayor to sign the thing so they can hire Quint. And the mayor's in shock, I think. And he just says, "My sons were on that beach too."
Yeah. He's very shaken. He's smoking, and his fingers are doing the thing. It's a good scene because, I mean, to a certain extent, you have to expect some shark activity on a beach. You have to expect some of it. But when it starts getting real like that, right, and everybody's terrified, it's a big deal. And the conceit of the book and the movie, in a way, is that this is no ordinary shark. Right. This is a man-eater. That's why they made a movie about it. And seeing how rattled these people are, these people who were refusing to be rattled before. It's an impactful scene.
I did look up. They hire Quint for $10,000. That's what he asks for. I looked it up. Today's money, that is 52,400 something or 700 something. It's over $52,000 is what he was asking for.
I mean, it's not cheap to charter a boat for anything.
Well, now he's got to buy. I was going to say he's got to buy a new boat, but he doesn't have to buy a new boat.
Not anymore, no.
And he's making those demands when Brody hires him: caviar, a new TV,
Schnapps.
champagne.
He wanted a case of peach schnapps, I think.
Yeah, something like that. And he's I think it's Brody's like 2 cases. Just great characters. And then now the only part that confused me is when Brody's wife has the psychic connection with the shark and it follows her to the Bahamas, which is
we
really
talk about the sequels, like no sequel talks, because I can, provided that I'm given snacks, I can be talked into watching the second one, because having the shark bite through that massive power line is kind of cool. After that, oh my God, like the whole thing of the shark taking revenge on the Brody family. And then there's Jaws 3D, which, oh God.
I saw numbers 2 and 3 in the theater. And I got to wear the glasses, the 3D glasses, and watch that horrible scene of the shark hitting the glass.
See, I never saw it in actual 3D. I saw it on TBS, and it was like, why does the shark look so weird? It took me a few years before I realized, because it was just called Jaws 3, and I was like, I didn't realize it was Jaws 3D. And right. It's just, if you don't have that reference, you don't understand why the shark looks really weird, and it's this really slow zoom in to come into hit that glass window. Oh, and the movie's just bad.
Yes, it is.
Young Dennis Quaid, how dare you?
I'll tell you, it's not much better if you see it in 3D. Another thing from the actual good movie was early on when Brody is looking through his shark books, he sees a picture of a shark with a tank in its mouth.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that foreshadowing there.
Oh, that whole book thing is also really good because they show the survivors.
Yes.
That they're showing these awful pictures of, and one of those pictures looks like a postmortem. There's no way with that shredded thigh, there's no way that person survived. There's no way they didn't bleed out.
Oh, and then when he finds out that the son is in his boat at the dock, and he's yelling at him to come in, and Mrs. Brody is just like, tomorrow's his birthday. He's not on the water. He's on the boat. And she happens to flip to a page that shows a shark tearing a boat up. And she just starts, listen to your father. Get out of the boat. Get up here.
When I was little, I was that creepy little kid that was always in my school library. And my school library had a book. This is elementary school. So it was a very thin, wobbly little paperback book, and it was just called Sharks. And the cover image was of a great white. And you know, the great thing about great white sharks is when they open their mouths, their teeth almost drop down, and you get a lot of gum with the teeth. And it was a picture of a great white with its gums, and it was biting through a net, and the net was shredding its gums. So it was a really bloody cover. I'll just never forget it. Like, I saw it and I was like, oh, I gotta check this out. And the inside was not terribly interesting because it didn't talk much about great whites, but that cover with the bloody shredded gums on this fishing net, it was like, oh, that's some good stuff. I was actually on a beach when a shark attack happened.
Ooh.
So I was in college, and we'd all taken it was spring break, so we went to Virginia Beach for the weekend. And we were in the water, bobbing around. You know, we were out deep and letting the waves kind of bob us, couldn't touch. And there was like a bunch of hubbub going down, maybe 100 yards down the beach. And at first we didn't realize what the hubbub was. And the lifeguards were calling everybody in, get out of the water, get out of the water. So we go up to the boardwalk and we go into a pizza place, and someone comes in and was like, do you know if that kid lived? And we were like, what? And there was a kid just 100 yards down the beach from us in the same depth of water, got attacked by a shark. And they pulled the kid out, but they also pulled the shark out. Like someone, like a big beefy guy grabbed the shark and pulled it out of the water, and they got the kid out. I don't remember if the kid survived, but like it was like, oh my God. And I couldn't get back in the water the rest of the weekend because every time I would start going out deep, you would think, what's swimming by my feet? It was really scary.
Well, just to clarify for people watching, whenever I say I love animals eating people, I'm talking about fictional animals. I love children being killed. I like babies being killed fictionally. Yeah, I do not want to see people in the real world getting hurt. That's why we read this stuff. And that's why I love animal attack movies. I love creature features. I love that in James Herbert's Rats, the first death is a baby eaten by the rats, but it's fiction. Just so we're clear to the viewers out there. I don't think anyone's gonna think otherwise, but
Well, I don't think anybody who's going to watch your show is going to think that, but we do have a problem with, outsiders of the community who don't quite understand that horror creators and horror fans don't actually want that. We connect with horror as a way to empathize, not delight.
you said you aren't that active on social media. Now I don't remember if it was earlier this week or last weekend. There was a hubbub about authors and what they write.
Yep, I was made aware of the hubbub.
Yes. They are not what they write, which, I mean, it seems obvious to me for the most part.
I don't pay enough attention to outside genres to know, but I wonder if horror is the only genre that gets that kind of bullshit, because there are questionable things done by characters in all genres.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we keep getting grief about it?
Well, I do think, and I read a lot of other genres. Well, other genres. I'm not going to say a lot of them, but I do think there are other genres where people think that because a creator made something, that they believe in that something. And one of the things I always seem to come back to, I'm a fan of Kevin Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And his movies, and have you ever seen any of his Q&A videos?
I have, yeah.
Absolutely hilarious. But there's one where someone asks him about Chasing Amy, and they say, I don't remember exactly what the question is, but essentially, don't you feel bad? Don't you feel that you're putting out the wrong message when you have somebody say, all a lesbian needs is a good deep dick? And he has to explain that he says, I made the stupidest, worst character say that to show that it's a stupid thing. I don't believe it. I'm not telling people that. I'm making the dumb character say it because it's a dumb belief.
And Chasing Amy is probably one of his more profound works. Like someone who specializes in purposefully offensive, silly stuff like Kevin Smith does, why would you be looking for depth there? Because, but again, when you're reading, you have to pay attention. You can tell when a writer is romanticizing something, and you can tell when a writer is writing something in such a way to be repulsive. Like, okay, does George R.R. Martin get grief for all the rape and the child murder that's in the Fire and Ice books? I would hope not, because they're written to be horrifying. They're not written to look neat.
I have not read any of them. I do know some people that stopped watching the show because they felt there was too much of that.
I'm one of them. They added rape to a series in the show. They added it, and there was something. It's been kind of validating after the show ended and having actors come forward and talk about the overt things that they were bullied into doing by those douche bro showrunners. And that's what they are. If I sound dismissive of them, it's on purpose. Because if you read the books, it's a complex story. And the female characters are given every bit as much agency and page length as the men. And to just reduce them to these naked beings on all fours, taking a dry pounding from another actor, that's reductive. Because the stories are much more than that. And George R.R. Martin went to pains to make sure that they were more than that.
As I said, I've never read the books and I've never seen the show. So I can't comment on any of that. The only George R.R. Martin I've read was some of his horror. Mm-hmm. And some of the superhero world that he made up, the Wild Cards.
I'm not aware of that one. So the Fire and Ice books, I mean, it's kind of good. It takes him so long to write them because it takes a while to read them, but it's a commitment. And mm-hmm. I think those of us who have committed to read them, who are annoyed by the show only to have the rabble who watched it dismiss us because we had problems with it. It's a commitment. We're going to have feelings about it because it takes a long time to read those books.
Right. All right. So any final thoughts on Jaws the movie, Jaws the book? We'll sort of wrap up this part. The Jaws part.
The book, I maintain that the book is good. You know, Peter Benchley wrote, this was not his first kind of sea horror book. He wrote other water monster books, other boat books. And, you know, he became a marine activist later in his life before he died. And this was something that he cared about. Now, I've got conflicting sources. Some that say that Jaws, because it was so popular, it aided in the rise of murder of sharks, overfishing, stuff like that. But I've also read that is sort of an urban legend. It's not true. But the fact remains that this writer, Peter Benchley, he felt a kinship to marine life. He felt that it was something worth saving. And he was a very, very major activist in marine conservation, which I think is great. And it's a short book. It's a good read. I think if you think you're going to get the same story as the movie, you might be disappointed. Go into it knowing it's different, but also go into it knowing that you actually can get a little more of the story of Amity from the book that you don't necessarily get in the movie. You get a little better understanding of why, especially why they're not so willing to close down the beaches. That's right. Explained much better in the book. But the movie is just, it's 5 stars. It's, my oldest son and I watch this movie together once a year. My oldest son shares almost none of my interests, and yet we both love shark movies. Like Deep Blue Sea. We both love Deep Blue Sea, but it started with Jaws because it is quite possibly the perfect shark movie.
I don't know. It's no Shark Night.
Oh, God.
I had to. I just had to. Okay. And just for folks, my copy, 278 pages. Not long at all. Yeah. It is the shark movie. All other shark movies are going to be compared to. There's just no way to avoid making comparisons. And yeah, I enjoy shark movies. Deep Blue Sea, a lot of fun. I still think. Now, have you seen the? I can't remember. I think we talked about this when we did the trivia with Mary. That on the Final Destination 2 DVD, there's a special feature where you can have everybody hit by a bus.
Yeah.
I think that every movie that Samuel Jackson is in should have a special feature where in the middle of talking, a shark just jumps out and eats him.
That's the thing about Deep Blue Sea. I remember when it came out and everybody was mean to the movie, but you watch it now and you're surprised when things happen. Like what happens to Stellan Skarsgård? That whole thing is really fucked up and surprising. It jumping up and eating Samuel L. Jackson like that when he's in the middle of one of his very Samuel L. Jackson screaming rants. It's perfect. It's a good movie.
Just imagine it. Snakes on a plane. Samuel L. Jackson. I want these motherfucking snakes off my... And a shark comes out of the overhead compartment and just grabs him and eats him.
I mean, this is the perfect idea. This is the perfect idea.
Come on, Hollywood. You should be knocking down my door. Okay. All right. So do you have anything that you want to promote or talk about for yourself?
Just listen to the Ghost Riders podcast where we talk about bad movies on there.
Yes. Well, although it seems
a few of our listeners asked that we start combining books and movie talk a little more. So we have started kind of doing what we did here today. We will talk about a book and a corresponding movie with it. So the last one that we did was Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We did Darkman before that. What was the one we did before then?
Well, I was going to say, I did not listen. I only started listening because I have not read nor seen 1408.
Oh, 14. Okay. As someone who's your friend.
Yes.
You're on YouTube now. You can listen to Stephen King read 1408 on YouTube.
Oh, wow.
Highly recommend, because having him read it that's the way to go. And it's a great movie. It's like there are mild differences, but that's a totally solid screen adaptation. I can't be too mad at that one.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It seems like, everybody seemed to agree that 1408 was good.
And that's a movie that gets overlooked. I mean, because it's weird. It's Stephen King going Stephen King weird, but well. And they do a really good job respecting that in the movie and expanding on it a little bit, because it is a short story.
And the other thing that seems to me is that it used to be multiple movies on the podcast, and now it seems to be focused on one, maybe branches, like when you're talking about Darkman, and branch off into Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
But 3 hours of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. But there is, you guys do talk about a lot, much like we did today, talk about a lot of different things. There's tangents and all sorts of stuff. But yes, the Ghost Riders podcast, fantastic podcast. Are you still doing the classics?
Yes, I still do a case for classics.
Okay.
That's a podcast where basically I make a case for a piece of classical literature every week. I'm a little renegade about what I consider to be classical literature. I insert a little more horror than some might like, but as a horror creator and a horror fan, horror is a big part of my life. So I do talk a lot about that. But there's also a good dose of Jane Austen in there as well. I also really do my best to make sure it's diverse, because when we're talking the classics, it very easily could be just a bunch of white men. And I make sure there's a very diverse cast of authors being represented.
Well, not to ask about a white man, but I have never read, so should I read The Picture of Dorian Gray?
What's your limit? What's your attention span?
Well, I don't know. I've read The Stand. I've read... all right, well... you know how I said earlier I used to say that Pet Sematary was the most boring book I'd ever read?
Mm-hmm.
Second most boring book I'd ever read? I've always said the first most boring book I've ever read was Jane Eyre. I don't know if that helps calibrate where I'm at.
So The thing about classics is that their pacing is different, and depending on the era in which the author lived, there were times where the language was very flowery and it took forever to make a point. The thing that I ask on the podcast is to give the work a one chapter try. And a lot of the works that I cover have gone into public domain and you can get them for free.
Mhm.
You can almost always find these works at your local library. You don't have to pay to read these. So the one chapter try to get a taste for what the writer's doing. The Portrait of Dorian Gray is extremely interesting. The story as a whole is extremely interesting, but the writing may not be for some. Oscar Wilde had a style, very flamboyant style, both on and off the page, and it's not for everybody. But if you can get through one chapter, give it a try.
Well, I mean, I read Lovecraft. Um, as I said, I love Frankenstein. I like Dracula. I enjoyed Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, to be precise. Um, so I'm not averse to old stories, and I've read a number of different old writing styles. I've read um, a lot of Greek philosophy, that type of thing. Um, so yeah, all right. I'll maybe I'll give it a try.
Give it a try.
It's an interesting story. I've actually read Graham Masterton. Um, had a novel that was sort of a sequel, and I can't remember. Picture of Evil. Can't remember the title. I think it was the first thing I ever read by Graham Masterton, but it was a sequel to Dorian Gray. But I've never read the original.
I mean, I think it's worth it, but I say that knowing that Wilde's style may not be for everybody.
All right. Um, okay, so you're submitting something soon in a
Mm-hmm.
day or two. And nothing else you can tell us about that? What it's about, who you're submitting to, anything?
No, I can't say
All
anything yet.
right.
It's bad luck to talk too much before contracts are signed.
Okay. All right. All right. Um, okay. Anything else at all before? Where can people find you online if you care for them to find you?
You can find me. I mean, if you tag me in things, I do see it. I prefer you find me on Twitter, and it's at SOMERM, Summer M. I'm there. I do linger. I do kind of hang out. I just don't engage. I'm a
Sure.
lurker, but I mean, if you friend me, I'll accept it.
All right. Great. Well, thank you very much for being here. I had a great time meandering all over the map.
These talks are fun. I like doing this.
And we've got to get Mary and Matt next time.
Yeah,
Do
Matt was
another
sick
trivia.
last time.
And all right, so folks, thank you for watching. Thank you, Summer, for being here. I'll have links in the description for like the Ghost Riders podcast, Case for Classics. I think I'll probably put a link for Scares the Care in there. So, because you can donate at any time, not just when there's a convention. And so, folks, if you have any comments or questions, put them in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. All the usual YouTube stuff. And that's all I've got for this episode of My Favorite Horror With. So until next time, folks, read more books.
Please.